and welcome to our discussion on the Federalist and Anti-Federalist Papers, sponsored by the Principles of Freedom Foundation. This foundation was formed to provide an environment where we can discuss principles of freedom just like they did back in our founding fathers era at the taverns, at the churches, and at the town halls. So hopefully you have studied the materials today that we'll be discussing. And on our discussion tonight, we have Abby Bowman, Julie Farnbach, Tyler and Tiffany Mason, Derek Harris, David Bishop, Juliet Bellinger, and myself, Brooklyn McClure. So we hope that you will continue the conversation after this discussion in the comments below, on our Facebook group, on our YouTube channel, and especially with your family and your friends. So today we'll be discussing some of the Federalist and Anti-Federalist papers that had to do with a republic. So I felt like it was important first to establish what the definitions are of a democracy and a republic and what the differences are. So we're going to start with Julie Farnbach. Will you give us the definition of a democracy?
Well, you've got the meme definition, which is democracy is two wolves and a lamb deciding what's for dinner. But the actual academic definition, the word democracy comes from the Greek demos for people and kratia for government. And it involves mass participation in government, but it can only work in a small group, such as a family or a village. And once you outgrow the size of your largest building, you cannot have a direct democracy. Also, Alexander Tytler reminds us that a democracy cannot exist as a permanent form of government. It can only exist until the majority of the voters discover they can vote themselves largesse from the public treasury. And that it has definite impact on our modern society. But the use of the word democracy, really briefly, in American society didn't crop up until the progressive era of the beginning of the 20th century, when there was a pointed agenda to shorten the distance, literally, between the people and the lawmakers, because there was so much administrative government in between that progressive leaders could not get the things they wanted changed soon enough. And that's when they started calling it a democracy and started whittling back putting in the 17th Amendment and putting in the process of having the people directly change their state constitutions through what's the process? I just lost the word. Sorry. They do it in California all the time, when the people overrule the legislature and then the legislature overrules the people through the propositions that are added to them.
Like a recall, like we're in the process of?
No, not a recall, but people directly legislating through the proposition process.
Okay.
So there you have it.
Okay, thank you for that definition. Yeah, so in essence, like democracy is mob rule. And like you mentioned, there are no existing democracies on a governmental level because they are the quickest to end violently, and they always end usually with a tyrant or a dictator at its head. Okay, so let's compare that definition with Tiffany. You have a definition of a republic?
Yeah, so a people's constitutional republic is sometimes called a federal republic or a democratic republic. This system is based on the supreme will of the people, which is expressed in a written constitution. It was invented by the American founding fathers. This American system divides powers vertically and horizontally and assigns to each level of government those responsibilities which can be most efficiently and economically administered there. It proved to be the soundest system of the government ever devised by man. So the simple, all power from the people. And that came from, what was that book? Making of America, which is a great book. for those that want to learn more about our Constitution. Maybe we could put that in the show notes, Brooke, or the comments so that people can look up that book later.
Okay, great idea. I will make a note of that. So thank you for sharing that, that definition of a republic. So it is government by the people, but it's through representatives, which is a huge difference between democracy is government by the people. Literally, if we had a democracy, which we don't, I cringe when people call us a democracy. There's actually no democracy in our US Constitution. It's a republic and it's all representative, right? So just to set just a visual in our heads, like on one side of a spectrum, you have democracy, which is mob rule, and it always leads to anarchy. Like, for example, if we had a democracy in our country, every single citizen would be voting on every single bill and law passed. Every single person. That's democracy, and that's chaos. And then on the other end, you have tyranny, a dictatorship, which is one person's ruling it all, right? And then in between there, you have aristocracies, monarchies, oligarchies. But right in the middle, our founding fathers created the Constitution, this constitutional republic, which is, like you said in that definition, a vertical and horizontal distribution of power. So with those definitions and with what we've read in our readings, does anyone have anything to share, especially like what's the big deal maybe of calling us a democracy?
Well, really quick, the reason why that this came to my mind so much when reading this is Biden used the word democracy so many times in the inauguration that just barely happened. So I did a quick fact check on it. And on CNNBC, it said, let me find it. This is America's day. This is democracy's day. Biden started it at this, started his speech. The will of the people has been heard and the will of the people has been heeded. We have learned again that democracy is precious. Democracy is fragile. And at this hour, my friends, democracy has prevailed. So a total, according to CNNBC, 11 times he called our country, he talked about democracy. Like, this is why this is so important. I almost wonder if he thinks if he says it enough, maybe we'll believe it and we won't even recognize what we are anymore. I mean, it's definitely not being taught in the schools.
You're absolutely right. That was part of the agenda 100 years ago. They started calling it a democracy because they wanted it to be a democracy. They wanted people to consider it that. And we all know very well that the public education system does not teach history well enough to overcome what people hear in the news every day.
Well, and I think tying kind of those 2 points together, if we look at the education that we had, I can't even speak for the education in the schools right now. Julie, you're directly involved with it. We homeschool our kids. So, you know, I get to give the perspective or the narrative the way that I feel it should be given in my home, right? But I was raised, and the only republic that I could ever point a finger at and be like, that was a republic, would have been Rome or Greece. And they both fell. So I think if we were to go around and we were to do the Jimmy Kimmel and walk around with the microphone on the street and ask people, you know, are we a democracy or a republic? They'd all say we're a democracy. And if we were to ask for an example of a republic and if it's good or bad, they'd say, no, the only republics I can think of fell apart in chaos with a tyrant that came out of it with the Caesars in Rome. So I think they've done a fantastic job of educating from the ground up that we are a democracy. And my say matters in the way that we talked about, where it's a direct correlation to what happens. Hence the election, the way that it was. Democracy has spoken, and you know, we can spout on forever about that, and I know we're not going to, but I think that really is significant, that we have seen that shift in mentality for a very long time that demonizes the republic and glorifies the democracy.
I agree. And really quickly, it isn't taught, and they don't even teach the Federalist Papers in the conservative law schools anymore. But this is not what the founders intended. The founders wanted their people to have read Hobbes and Locke and Blackstone and Montesquieu and be able to discuss why we need a republic and why democracy doesn't work, and be able to discuss those concepts. And most people I know have never heard of Hobbes or Montesquieu, let alone read them or tried to see how that matters.
Thank you. You bring up great points, and bringing it back to even what we are studying, these Federalist and Anti-Federalist papers, the reason they are even having these discussions is they were operating under the Articles of Confederation, which on that scale that we just discussed was a little bit shifted, not in the middle, it was shifted towards democracy. There was too much democracy with these Articles of Confederation, too much say by the people in the states, and no federal branch at all. And so the discussion is, hey, we want a whole new form of government. Right now you're under a confederation with a lot of democracy. We want to shift it more towards the middle and have this republic. And so they're trying to convince people to create a whole new form of government. And so I feel like one of the questions I thought of, Tyler, when you were talking is, we've only known these republics that fall apart. So what is it that causes those republics to come to their demise?
Before we move on to that, can I lay out a little bit? The Electoral College seems to be on the attack, or it's being attacked big time by these democracy, by the idea of pushing a democracy that Julie was talking about. And the function of the Electoral College is a function of a republic. And how does it do that? So there's a democratic element to it because there is a popular election, but that popular vote is independent in each state. So there's actually 50 elections, not one election. And so the majority of each state, which allows each state to be independent, but yet united, which lesson we learned from the Greeks, who had a group of divided Greek city-states, which led to their demise because they didn't have a unified power to fight off their common foe. So we have each state gets a vote represented by the number of legislators they have in their state, which combines the number of representatives and number of senators. So each state automatically gets 2. District of Columbia is not a state, so it doesn't get any senators. So 2 senators for each state, there's 2 electoral votes. And then the number of representatives is represented by popular vote. This is the great compromise that was put forward by Roger Sherman, who I hope that we talk more about because he's my absolute hero. He signed all 4 of the historical documents, which is a conversation for another time. So it would be like the Yankees and the Dodgers playing in the World Series, the Yankees winning game 1 and game 2, 1-0. And then the Dodgers win game 3 and 4, 10-2 and 11-3. And then the Yankees win the next 2 games, 1-0 or 2-0. And then you add up the runs, the Dodgers should win because they have the most runs. No, each independent game, you have to win 4 games out of a 7-game series, and the Yankees won with fewer runs. So each state, no matter what their population is, still has a viable voice, which keeps us together. There's nobody that's going to be so distraught because the founders wanted to ward off foreign influence. What is going to happen if a state feels so weak that they no longer have a voice? They're going to find common ground with a foreign adversary, and they're going to be right next to us. Can you imagine Arizona or Nevada right next door with a heavy Russian and Chinese influence there, or Iran or something like that, we would be in immediate danger. So I just love the process of understanding the Electoral College and how it functions as a republic, not a democracy, but with a democratic element to it. Very important.
Derek, did you listen to that episode of my podcast? Is that where you got that analogy from?
No.
Seriously? It's actually not mine. I can't take credit for it. It was Douglas Gibbs, who's a friend of several of ours that are on this podcast right now. But he gave that exact analogy when we were talking about the Electoral College and what happens if it goes away. But the thing that's amazing, and I'm glad you bring that up, and Brooke, I know you've got a direction you want to go with this, but I'm just going to put a pin in this one as well. The Electoral College is probably the biggest barrier, the biggest barricade that kept us as a republic and not a democracy. And I think the founding fathers were brilliant in setting that up, because they're like, okay, wait a second, we're going to let people, I hate to say have the illusion of, but have the illusion that they have a vote, when really it's these electorates that get to decide the outcome. And as Douglas Gibbs said, when I was chatting with him about this very thing, as he said, the electors were incredibly popular during those elections because everybody was trying to sway and influence those Electoral College votes. But that's what really protected against fraud. That's what really protected against everything the founding fathers were so terrified of when people started throwing around the word democracy. So whoa. We don't want that headache because it doesn't work. We need a republic, and this is how we're going to safeguard it. And so it is very terrifying to see people trying to pull down that last barrier of defense that prevents us from becoming a true democracy. And we know where that leads.
Thank you. I think those comments all spoke to the point that I was trying to get at as well, which is, what is the danger then facing our republic right now? I think we will recognize, if we studied history at all, that we're in a certain cycle of history that is bondage. We're already in bondage. Most people don't even realize it, and we're headed deeper into it. So how did that happen? But even on a more personal level, does that have anything to do with individuals and the way we're living our personal lives? Does that translate at all? Or is this strictly a governmental problem? Because people usually want to just attack Washington, D.C., or even our governor. Oh, let's recall the governor. Well, okay, maybe that'll help, but will it? Or do the people simply elect the same problems? What are your thoughts?
I am kind of a big proponent of personal responsibility in all ways, but in this one, where do we get our leaders, our government leaders from? We get them from the pool of the citizens. Who elects them? The citizens. Who are the electors? The citizens. We create what we have. We created this. And that isn't to say that those that we put in positions of power have not taken the ball and run with it at times, right? But what we do in our own homes matters very, very much. And what we do with our neighbors matters very, very much. If you can point a finger at someone in government, you can point a finger back at yourself, because this is what we created. We raised these people and we elected these people.
Thank you. I think that goes along with what Centinel says in the Anti-Federalist paper that we read. He said, the people never steadily attend to the operations of government. So that was one of his greatest fears of creating this republic where you're sending representatives. He predicted that people are going to stop paying attention to the government because they've just handed it all over to representatives. And I think that's happened today. Who even writes the representatives or voices their thoughts? And which representatives even listen? if you do. So were there other thoughts?
Part of this is also a matter of what you believe about humanity. And this is something they recognized 100 years ago. The progressives don't believe the same things about human nature that the founding fathers do. And that has come up in several of the different papers in very kind of minor off to the side mentions. But the people who want democracy believe that people should be taken care of. And the people who respect a republic are those who respect individual freedom and the responsibility, like Abby just said, that comes with it. But just like Rome, I think we're too fat and happy. We're too comfortable. We want our bread and circuses. And everybody is too tired at the end of the day to care, to spend any time reading history, writing to their representatives, or learning how local government works.
Did Julie just call me fat?
No.
I'm just kidding.
Tyler, did you have something?
I did actually. I was listening with one ear, so I apologize if I didn't catch everything that was said, because I'm sure it was fantastic. But there's a quote that's been ringing in my ears that I read just recently from Alexis de Tocqueville, and I think it's volume 1 of what is it? The Constitution of America. He says, I think it's this right here. He says right here, if you question an American respecting his own country, and this was written in like 1807, I think, right? If you question an American respecting his own country, he will inform you what his rights are and by what means he exercises them. You will find that he is familiar with the mechanism of the laws. The American learns to know the laws by participating in the act of legislation. The great work of society is never going on before his eyes and, as it were, under his hands. In the United States, politics are the end and aim of education. So is it a personal responsibility? Absolutely. It's really easy to point the finger at Capitol Hill and be like, they're a bunch of idiots up there and I have no idea what they're doing. But where does it start? It starts first with us knowing what my First Amendment rights are, what my Second Amendment rights are, what, freedoms and liberties are mine that I have granted to the government. And I think we talked about this in one of our previous roundtable discussions. The government doesn't give me my rights, I give them theirs. But if we don't teach our kids, this is how our system works, and this is why you've got to defend it. Politicians are notorious through the history of time of, this is my allotment, I'm going to see if I can get this much. Oh, I got it. I'm going to take a little more. And suddenly the people think I'm subject to my government and not the other way around.
I agree. I had posted a meme on Facebook, I think last year, that said, stop calling them our leaders. We are the leaders. They are our representatives. But we have to be careful with the rhetoric we use, right? That makes a big difference. You say it enough and you start to believe it. Oh, they're our leaders. We follow them. Oh, we are a democracy because the president of the United States said so. No. And I think we've lost. So I think we've identified a couple principles that have gone askew then over the years. One being education, right? We're not educating the children in the public school system, at least, and I've been in both systems now, as to what kind of government we actually are. And you can surmise why that is or isn't happening. What are some other principles then, since we're here to discuss these principles of freedom, that are a little askew, and what can we do about that?
Like Tiffany and others, I've been kind of observing, and I'm kind of looking at my own personal responsibility here. I'm sitting in a place where I've watched it get darker on me as time has gone by. And I've liked this little lens flare right here. That's from a poorly placed screen protector on my phone. And I guess I'm just laughing at that because of how easy it is to slowly go along and move into without seeking true knowledge. And I feel like it's my responsibility to seek for light. And I didn't park in a good place for light, did I? And to put myself in a position to learn and be around others who can enhance my knowledge. And I think that's what these founding fathers did, and tried to be vulnerable enough to maybe remove their screen protectors to see more clearly and things. So I think there's a lot.
Well, and I think, David, going with your point, Brooke is looking for other areas we've gone askew, but it's so hard to get off of the education one. This group, we have a behind the scenes discussion, if you will. It's a group message that we're all in. And one of our members, they posted, I just feel like I need to do something the other day. And I understand that. It's like, everything's falling apart. I need to get out there. I need to do something. But sometimes the best thing you can do is you can just sit and you can wait and you can study so that when the right opportunity presents itself, you know what to do. You've studied it. You know the history. You know the solution because you've invested the time. And that's really where it is that all of us are at right now, is we're just investing the time. You know, we're all at different stages in life and different tracks we're all going the same direction. And that is, we want to preserve these principles of freedom. How do we do that? It's by having these conversations. It's by thinking critically. It's by trying to understand, why is it that Hamilton said what he said and Madison said what he said, and all, you know, it's because that's important and it's valuable. Because like Brooke said, history will repeat itself, and those that are prepared will be able to step in and will be able to provide value in the righting of the wheel.
I appreciate that, Tyler. It feels like we want to do something, but I'm finding that when I'm truly standing in light of true principles, that we are peace, we are freedom, and it is a much bigger deal than we might imagine.
I think Tyler's point too about what we discussed the other night, being prepared and for when that time comes. Here's what's been sticking in my mind all week, besides the things from Teddy Roosevelt and Woodrow Wilson in the early 20th century. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it. I could read it if you want me to, but Nikita Khrushchev told America that they would take us down without fighting a shot. They didn't have to invade. All they had to do was wait. And so the non-freedom supporting world is doing the same thing, planning and preparing and being patient and waiting for the right time. And the only way I know, well, I guess there's two ways. The only way I know to overcome that is through education. Like Tyler said, it all comes back to that, and spiritual preparation. I really don't know that in my mind or heart I can divorce the two. And I think that John Adams felt the same way. He recognized that this republic could never be maintained except by a God-loving people. Because unless you govern yourself, your family, this system of government is inadequate to control people, to provide safety from people who will not control themselves. And I think people have just let go of that. We're so busy, we're so distracted. We've got to get everybody to school and to soccer practice and then hurry home to have dinner, and then do help with homework and do baths and get the kids to bed. And by that time, all the parents want to do is have a drink and watch mindless TV. And we have to be, I think, shining examples of another way to do it, another way to live family life, another way to have faith and not impose it on anyone else.
I was just considering that very point this morning, actually, in personal reflection. And why is it that the path of least resistance is so hard to get out of, right? We think of, let's get back to the topic of these founding fathers and these principles of freedom that created this Constitution for what it is. It would have been so easy for them to say, it's swelteringly hot. We're technically going outside of our mandate. We're supposed to be fixing the Articles of Confederation, but instead we're just going to write a whole new form of government, right? Path of least resistance would have been, look, let's just show up. We'll shake some hands. We'll kind of, catch up a little bit. We'll say, yeah, we made some minor changes to the Articles of Confederation. And then that's it. We go home to our families and our jobs and our lives and everything. But that was the easy way. So how do we avoid the easy way all the time and say, you know what? All right, I may not like what Hamilton has to say in the Federalist Papers, but we're going to read it and we're going to see why it matters, right? I may not like watching the State of the Union address from a president that I hate, but I need to watch it so that I can see the perspective of what's going on. Get out of the simple and get into something that's meaningful, and that's never going to be easy.
Thank you. That goes along. I love all these comments. Does come down to education. I can't help but stare at beautiful Juliet on my screen, who is someone who is just living this mission and being that instrument in God's hands. To see how far we've come in personal liberties in our personal lives, how far she's come, and now she's turning that around. And will you just talk about the Compass Group, Juliet, because it is all about education. Every time I look at you on the screen right now, I'm like, this is what she's doing. There's someone, all of us have something to do in these winding up scenes of whatever's about to happen. And it's all individual, and we have to just follow whatever that is for us. I felt to start this podcast. Other people are, Julie's in law school. I see David with his kids, and it's more of just exuding love and just stillness. And so, Juliet, will you just give us an example of living life mission and what your Compass Group does?
Sure. For many years now, I've just felt so called to promote the search for truth, and just a really unifying and I think an easy place for people to settle into and start that search is through classic literature. And so the Compass Group is a book discussion group. It started, I started it back in 2012. It took a couple-year break, and now it's back going again. But basically, it's just, most people would just look at it and say, oh, this is a book club, but it's more in that the goal is to unify individuals in their search for truth, and recognizing that there are these really, that there is truth out there, and that we can discover it through many means. But I think what you're talking about is kind of discovering personal mission, personal, our personal call, some people might say. And, there's different areas that we feel called to do these things. In my case, it's to is the search for truth with the goal of liberating the captive. Eventually, my goal is to help those who are imprisoned, either figuratively or literally, and help them get that truth in their hands and feel empowered by it, going back to that education and things. So the Compass Group is just one way that I'm kind of promoting that mission.
Can I mention something along those lines? I love what Julie's doing, and she's found a talent that she has, and organizing a group of people getting together and having a discussion. I've been a part of it from time to time, and the books are non-threatening, and the collaboration of ideas is free flowing, and I think that as well as this is an example of what we have to do. Don't we complicate it too much? What can we do? It just seems so, the enormity of this big government, big brother idea imposing their will on us, and we feel like we don't have a voice. We feel like, gosh, I need to do something big. No, we don't. It's got to be something small. Do a compass group, join Julie's group, Juliet's group, or join this podcast and form your own podcast. Whatever it takes, have this conversation with each other, and you'll find, like myself, when I go to work, like-minded people will join me, and we'll have little sidebars, and we have little ideas floating back and forth, and some people get hostile, and we have the opportunity to be more of a voice of reason, because even when people are right, if they carry a hammer when they're right, then it's not taken well. And so we have to be like the peaceful, calming voice when we feel like we're in the position of right. And then of course you weigh that out in our social environment to see where it lands, and that's where that's what helped us navigate. And I love Tyler's analogy of the ease of following the path of least resistance. What's that saying? Men like rivers become crooked by following the path of least resistance.
Juliet, I've loved your group over the years too. Can you share with us the compass, the directions? I think that's really meaningful and instructive.
Oh, well, just, yeah, I mean, obviously there's the different directions, and, you know, north pointing to the north, north being, you know, pointing, we consider it up in the compass group, pointing towards God. Generally when I choose the books, we do have a direction. It changes from time to time. Right now, I'm back to more of a gathering phase after having a couple of years off. So we're just kind of back to just gathering and focusing on community. The book, for example, this month is the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society, and it's a group that, you know, fictional story of a group that came together during the Nazi occupation of Guernsey, one of the Channel Islands off of Great Britain, and it just really struck me how much we need each other, how much we need community, how much we need to unify in a real way over true principles. These are the unifying things that I really think will help sustain us through these difficult times.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah.
Sorry, I just have to tell you one more quick thing.
Okay.
I think a lot of people would be hard pressed to define what is a principle. And I loved Juliet's group because we were finding truth, little nuggets of truth. I love reading these, you know, the founding documents and the Federalist Papers and Anti-Federalist Papers, looking for nuggets of truth. But I think we need to define a principle too. And David Bednar, whom I've been studying from recently, has done that. He's defined what is a doctrine, what is a principle, and what is an application. And I think that's very instructive. Maybe for next week, we ought to look that up and talk about exactly what a principle of freedom is. It's a statement of truth that's always applicable to any situation, right? And
Yeah,
that's my definition. And even Madison recognized in, I think it was 39, that it comes down to how well we communicate our ideas and what our vocabulary is, whether we're actually understanding each other or not and agreeing on these different options as they structured the Constitution.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's discuss that next time. Principles. I do that with the Key of Liberty class. We go through the Constitution, we read each part, and we discover what principles being taught in each article and each paragraph. So that's a great idea. Let's do that next time. And let's end with this from the Centinel. All the blessings of liberty and the dearest privileges of free men are now at stake and dependent on your present conduct. I think that's as true of a statement now as it was then, that it's all dependent on us because we are the people, we are the leaders. So I'd encourage all of us, anyone listening, pray about what it is that you can do or feel to help encourage education in true principles in whatever field, whatever area, because it's all connected. So it doesn't really matter if you're teaching the Constitution or you're teaching a child how to read. Like, it's all connected, it's all truth. But just prayerfully, it doesn't have to be anything big or showy. Just whatever it is you feel, it will add to the greater love and the unity throughout your family and your community and this whole world. So, and we'll have the notes for links to Juliet's group and to Tyler's podcast. It was an excellent one on the Electoral College that he did with Douglas Gibbs. We'll have that in our notes. So thank you everybody for joining us.